In this video, I am going to be guiding you through all of the diagrams required for the IGCSE Economics specific for the Cambridge syllabus. Here are the timestamps for your convenience. We start with the production possibility curves. Here we have A, which is the inefficient utilization of resources. B is when all resources within the economy is maximized, and C is completely unattainable as the economy does not have the capacity or resources to get there. This diagram is an illustration of opportunity cost. When the economy moves from A to B, it makes less consumer goods and more capital goods. There is a trade-off between the two. This curve illustrates a shift from PPC1 to PPC2, and the reasons are either economic growth, advance in technology, or population growth. And the curve can also shift to the left from PPC1 to PPC2, and the reasons are because of a natural disaster, war, or migration. Moving on to the demand curve. Here we have two individual demand diagrams, one for male customers and one for female customers. We see that at $10, the male customers buy 500 units, and the female customers will purchase 400 units. As the market demand is an aggregation of all the individual demand diagrams, then the total quantity is 900. This diagram illustrates the movements along the demand curve. As price increases, there will be a contraction in demand. As price increases from P1 to P2, quantity decreases from Q1 to Q2. And the inverse happens when price decreases from P1 to P2, quantity demanded increases from Q1 to Q2. This diagram illustrates the shifts in demand. As you can see here, D1 shifts to the right to D2. This is because of an increase in income, prices of related products, good advertising campaigns, a higher population, and the ability for the company to keep up with tastes and fashion. And the opposite can happen, shifting from D1 to the left to D2. And the reasons are a decrease in income, cheaper substitutes, a decrease in population, and a change in tastes and fashion. Moving on to the supply curve. This curve illustrates a movement along the supply curve. As you can see, when price increases from P1 to P2, there is an extension of supply, resulting in an increase of quantity supplied from Q1 to Q2. And decreasing the price will have an opposite effect, as quantity supplied will contract from Q1 to Q2. This diagram illustrates the increase of supply from S1 to S2. This is because of a reduced cost of production, better use of technology, lower taxes, better subsidies, good weather conditions, price of other goods, and a discovery of additional commodities. And the supply curve can shift to the left from S1 to S2. This is because of an increase in cost of production, high taxes, bad weather, prices of other products, wars, and a depletion of commodities. Now moving on to the equilibrium, disequilibrium, and price changes. This diagram shows the equilibrium price and quantity. This is because demand and supply are equal each other, which leads to PE and QE. At this point, it is highly efficient because there is an equilibrium price, or also known as the market clearing price. There is no excess demand or no excess supply. This diagram shows a demand for a product that is greater than the supply of the product. When prices decrease from PE to P1, the demand increases from QE to QD, and at the same time, the supply decreases from QE to QS, which results in a shortage as demand is now greater than supply. This diagram shows a surplus. As the price increases from PE to P1, we can see that the demand decreases from QE to QD, and at the same time, the supply increases from QE to QS, resulting in excess supply. This is because the supply is now greater than the demand. Please note that the excess is the distance between QS and QD. There are some textbooks which like to shade in this area here. This is incorrect because the surplus is the difference between QS and QD, which is illustrated by this line. Moving on. This diagram illustrates the price changes when demand increases from D1 to D2. The result of this is prices increase from P1 to P2 and quantity demanded increases from Q1 to Q2. The reasons for this is an increase in income, price of related products, advertising campaigns, higher population, and taste and fashion. And going the other way, when demand shifts from D1 to D2, this results in a decrease in price from P1 to P2 and a decrease in quantity demanded from Q1 to Q2. And the reasons are a decrease in income, cheaper substitutes, decrease in population, and taste and fashion. This diagram illustrates the price changes when supply shifts to the right from S1 to S2. The result of this is that prices decrease from P1 to P2 and the quantity supplied increases from Q1 to Q2. This is because of reduced cost of production, technology, good weather, price of other products, discovery of commodities, and subsidies. Going the other way, supply could decrease and shift to the left from S1 to S2, which elevates price from P1 to P2, and quantity supplied decreases from Q1 to Q2. This could be from an increase of cost of production, high indirect taxes, bad weather, prices of other products, wars, and a depletion of commodities. Now moving on to price elasticity of demand. This diagram shows a small decrease in price from P1 to P2, and the quantity demanded rises by a greater proportion at Q1 and Q2. Some examples of elastic products could be airline travel, soft drinks, chocolate bars, and cars. This is an inelastic demand curve, which shows a large price decrease from P1 to P2, but quantity demanded only rises from Q1 to Q2, which is a lesser proportion. Some examples can be paper clips, alcohol, gas, electricity, and cigarettes. This diagram shows a perfectly inelastic product. So this means there could be a large price increase from P1 to P2, but quantity demanded will remain unchanged. One example can be insulin. As insulin is a life-saving medicine, people will buy this at any price. This is a perfectly elastic demand curve. This means that any change in price, quantity demanded will just simply disappear. One example will be the foreign exchange market. This is because the information is perfect, as anybody can find the market value of any currency at any time. So if a business wanted to charge a slightly higher price for its currency, then the demand will simply disappear. This is when demand is unitary, meaning that when prices decrease from P1 to P2, say 10%, quantity demanded increases from Q1 to Q2 at also 10%. So quantity demanded rises by the same proportion. Moving on to price elasticity of supply. An elastic supply curve means that quantity supplied is very responsive to price changes. Say, if price decreases from P1 to P2, the quantity supplied will decrease from Q1 to Q2, but at a greater proportion. Some examples include mass-produced goods, toothpicks, birthday cards, toothpaste, and soft drinks. But when supply is inelastic, it is not as responsive. As you can see, when prices decrease from P1 to P2, quantity supplied only decreases from Q1 to Q2, which is a smaller proportion. Some examples will be rare earth metals, fresh fruit, and vegetables. When supply is perfectly inelastic, this means that large changes in price from, let's say, from P1 down to P2, the quantity supplied just does not change. This will include concert tickets, football stadium, and concert halls, which has a set quantity of seats. And in the case for perfectly elastic supply, this means that they are in a very competitive market and firms will supply whatever quantity at the same price. When supply is unit elastic, this means that the supply curve has to pass through the origin, which is 0. So at any point of the line, the percentage change is exactly the same for price and quantity. So please do not confuse the steepness of the curve. Moving on to government intervention. This diagram shows a government intervention of a price ceiling. This is to protect the interest of the customers whilst lowering price and encourages consumption. So as you can see, when prices decrease from PE to PC, the quantity demanded will increase from QE to QD, but at the same time, the supply will decrease from QE to QS, which results in a shortage. Some examples can include rent, gasoline, and medicine. All of these which are necessities, and the consumer will benefit from the lower prices. Moving on to price floors. This is a minimum price set by the government, and the effect of this is that it encourages additional supply to the market for a good, such as minimum wages, which is labor, taxi fare minimums, taxi drivers, and agricultural price support, so more agricultural products, which is a necessity. And the function of this is when prices increase from PE to PF, quantity supplied increases from QE to QS, and quantity demanded reduces from QE to QD, resulting in a surplus. And in the case of an indirect tax, this shifts supply to the left from S1 to S2 plus tax. Some examples can include cigarettes and alcohol. And the effect in the shift of supply is that price increases from P1 to P2 and quantity supplied decreases from Q1 to Q2. This part isn't quite in your syllabus, but I think it is good to know, as consumers are paying a new price of P2, and the tax is the distance between S1 and S2 plus tax, which means that the producers are receiving revenue of P3. So as you can see, this box here illustrates the government tax revenue from this tax. Now, this is an alternative approach to taxation where we tax the consumers. Please be reminded that this is not in your syllabus, and this is merely for informational purposes only. So if the government decides to tax a product, say cigarettes, this shifts the demand curve from D1 to D2 plus tax. As a result, the quantity demanded contracts from Q1 to Q2. Now, due to the law of supply, Suppliers are forced to accept a new price of P2 because demand has shifted from D1 to D2. And as we know the gap between D1 and D2 is the tax, we can then find out how much consumers are going to pay. And in this case, it is P3. So if we know that the producers are receiving P2 and the consumers are paying P3, the tax revenue is this box here. As you can see, the effect of the tax is exactly the same if you tax the customer or the supplier. Suppliers are usually the ones that get taxed because it is administratively easier to collect them from suppliers. This diagram represents a subsidy, which lowers production costs and encourages production. So supply shifts from S1 to S2 plus subsidy. The effect of this is that prices will decrease from P1 to P2 and quantity supplied will increase from Q1 to Q2. Please be reminded that a government giving a firm a subsidy does not increase their production costs through economies of scale and investing in new capital as per se. The reason why the lower production costs is that the government is subsidizing the additional output produced by the suppliers. Let me show you. Say the government's target of the quantity supplied of agricultural products is at Q2. Without the subsidy, suppliers are willing and able to create at P1 equals Q1. Now, without the subsidy, following the law of supply, if the suppliers were to supply Q2, they will want a price of P3. And at the same time, following the laws of demand without the subsidy, consumers will be willing and able to pay a price of P2. So now you can see there is a gap between what suppliers are willing to supply at and what consumers are willing to pay. So what the government needs to do is to provide a subsidy that bridges this gap. So in this case, P3 minus P2, which is the red line. So the total revenue before the subsidy would be P1 multiplied by Q1, which is this area here. And the new revenue will be P3 multiplied by Q2, which is this area here. Moving on to the labor market diagrams. This diagram represents when wage rates per hour decreases from W1 to W2, the number of workers demanded by firms increase from N1 to N2. This is because the cost of labor is now cheaper, resulting in firms wanting to hire more people. This is the supply of labor. When wages increase from W1 to W2, the number of workers supplied also increases as there is more incentive to work due to a higher wage rate. This is the backwards bending supply of labor diagram. When the wages increases from W1 to W2, the number of hours worked increases from H1 to H3. But when the wage increases from W2 to W3, the hours worked actually decreases from H3 to H2. The employee will still have very high income, but now has more leisure time to spend for themselves. This is a minimum wage diagram. When the minimum wage increases from W to W min, the supply of labor increases from Q star to QS here. And at the same time, the demand for labor decreases from Q star to QD here, which results in excess supply, as supply is now greater than demand. We have a labor surplus, which is the distance between QS and QD, which means that there is unemployment in the economy. This is an average total cost curve. Initially, the firm experiences economies of scale. This is because they have better utilization of resources and specialization. But as the firm grows, then it experiences diseconomies of scale. And this may be due to bureaucracy and slow decision making. This is a total cost curve. This is the sum of fixed and variable costs. Total costs always start below zero. This is due to fixed costs, which will be explained in the next slide. And then it goes up as output increases. Fixed costs, which are constant. Some examples of this would include labor, rent, and insurance. So if you sell zero outputs, you still have to pay these expenses. And these expenses remain the same no matter the output of the firm. So total costs and fixed costs start at exactly the same point. This is the average fixed cost diagram. The calculation to average fixed cost is total fixed cost over output. As fixed costs are constant, the more output the firm makes, the average fixed cost will decrease. This is a diagram that represents the variable cost, which is the direct cost of production. So the more output the firm makes, the more it's going to cost them in materials. And for the average variable cost, as output increases, the average variable cost falls and then rises due to diminishing returns, as each additional unit contributes to less output when output increases. Moving on to the types of taxes. Our first one is a progressive tax. This is when your income level increases from Y1 to Y2. Your tax rate also increases from T1 to T2. A regressive tax is the opposite, as when the income levels increase from Y1 to Y2, your tax rate decreases from T1 to T2. And the last one is a proportionate tax. You get taxed exactly the same no matter how much income you earn. So if your income level increases from Y1 to Y2, your tax rate will always be, in this case, 20%. Moving on to exchange rates. Say if Europe wants to import some goods. Initially, they need to supply its euros in order to buy another currency. So the effect is that S-Euro1 shifts to the right to S-Euro2. The result of this is that the currency depreciates from P1 to P2, and the quantity supplied, in this case euros, increases from Q1 to Q2. But on the other hand, if another country wants to buy European goods, this means that Europe will be exporting their goods. What the other country needs to do is to buy euros. So what happens is that demand for euros shifts from D-Euro1 to D-Euro2. And the result of this is that the euro will then appreciate from P1 to P2, and the quantity demanded for euros increases from Q1 to Q2. Lastly, this is a diagram illustrating a managed currency. The fixed rate, or the peg, will be set at PE, but the currency is allowed to fluctuate between P1 and P2. If the euro appreciates further than P2, what the European Central Bank will do, sell its euros to buy something else. These could be government treasury bonds, stocks, or other currencies. The result of this is that the supply of euros shifts to the right from S-Euro1 to S-Euro2. But if it depreciates further than P1, what the European Central Bank will do is buy a load of euros using their foreign currency reserves. So the demand for euros increases from D-Euro1 to D-Euro2, bringing it back to the equilibrium of PE. I hope that was helpful. I hope you guys have a good day. Bye-bye.